The film begins on a fateful day at Quantico. Clarice Starling, a promising young FBI trainee, is summoned by her superior, Mr. Crawford. While waiting in his office, she notices a wall covered with newspaper clippings and disturbing crime scene photos of Buffalo Bill, a serial killer the FBI is desperately hunting. According to the information gathered, Buffalo Bill kills overweight women and skins different parts of their bodies. Mr. Crawford assigns Clarice to visit the prison and interview Dr. Hannibal Lecter, a notorious psychiatrist who has become a cannibal, giving him a questionnaire. Clarice is chosen because she holds dual degrees in criminology and psychology, which prepare her to face a brilliant psychiatrist like Lecter. Crawford believes Hannibal's insight could help in the hunt for Buffalo Bill. Before Clarice leaves, he warns her about Hannibal's manipulative nature and advises her not to reveal anything personal to avoid being haunted by him. At the Baltimore State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, Dr. Chilton escorts Clarice to Hannibal's cell. Along the way, he makes suggestive remarks and warns her that Hannibal is extremely dangerous and intelligent, so under no circumstances should she touch the protective glass. He explained that years ago Hannibal complained of chest pain. When a nurse tried to assist him, he attacked, disfigured her face, and bit off her tongue. After leaving Clarice at the entrance to the special cell block, a resident psychiatrist directed her to Hannibal's cell and allowed her to go on her own. The hallway was filled with some of the most notorious killers, and Hannibal's cell was at the very end. Outside his cell, an inmate named Miggs stared at her intently. Unlike the other serial killers there, Hannibal remained unnervingly calm. His cell had no bars, but was secured with bulletproof walls. He politely asked to see Clarice's identification and seemed amused that the FBI had sent a trainee instead of a full agent to question him. His brilliance and extraordinary memory were evident, as he could recreate the entire cityscape of Florence purely from memory. Hannibal also realized that Crawford intended to use him to gain insight and eventually capture Buffalo Bill. When asked why Buffalo Bill skinned his victims, Clarice suggested it was to keep trophies, like many other serial killers. Hannibal, however, dismissed the idea, and Clarice countered that he did not need trophies since he consumed his victims. Hannibal then asked for the questionnaire. Although he was polite at first, he quickly grew irritated and impatient, unimpressed by the questionnaire and Clarice's attempts to analyze him. Hannibal showed his sharp insight by berating Clarice and making disturbingly accurate assumptions about her background, claiming she was a country girl raised in poverty. Shocked, Clarice replied that he should see himself the same way and mocked him by suggesting he was simply afraid. Offended, Hannibal revealed that the last person who tried to give him a questionnaire ended up with their liver eaten. He then coldly ordered Clarice to leave. As she walked down the corridor, an inmate named Miggs suddenly threw filth at her. Witnessing this, Hannibal immediately called out, demanding that she return. Hannibal said he could not bear the thought of Clarice being treated with such indignity, so he gave her another chance to interview him. Under one condition, she must look within herself and find his former patient, Miss Moffat. When she returned to her car, Clarice broke down in tears from the experience and comforted herself by recalling a childhood memory of joyfully greeting her sheriff father when he came home. In the following days, she lived like any other student at the FBI Academy. However, she often spent time in the research room studying Hannibal Lecter on her own. Not long after, Crawford called with news that Miggs had died. Hannibal had spent the entire day talking to him until Miggs somehow swallowed his own tongue and passed away. Clarice realized that Hannibal's last words, the phrase, "look inside yourself," might be a code. She began investigating and discovered a storage facility called Your Self Storage, located in Hannibal's hometown. When she arrived, the manager told her that the unit was registered under her name. Hester Moffat was a storage unit that had not been rented for over a decade. Since the door was stuck, they had to pry it open with a car jack. Inside, she pulled back a massive American flag covering a car and uncovered a headless mannequin. Even more horrifying, she found a human head preserved in a jar. After this discovery, she hurried to see Hannibal and proved her sharp mind by deducing that the name Hester Moffat was actually an anagram of the rest of me. She therefore believed that the storage unit was rented not by Hester Moffat, but by Hannibal himself. Hannibal then explained that the head she had found belonged to one of his former patients, Benjamin Raspail. He insisted that he had not killed Raspail, but had only kept the head. According to him, Raspail had been murdered by someone else for experimental purposes. Clarice believed that Hannibal's former patient was connected to Buffalo Bill, and that Hannibal knew his true identity. In the end, Hannibal offered to provide a psychological profile of Buffalo Bill in exchange for better living conditions, where he could see trees through an open window and stay away from the rude Chilton. He urged her to decide quickly, since Buffalo Bill was surely searching for his next special victim. Meanwhile, in Memphis, Tennessee, a woman driving home was being watched by a man wearing night vision glasses. When she arrived, she saw him struggling to load a sofa into a van with one arm in a cast. Feeling sorry for him, she offered to help and climbed into the van to move the sofa inside. After oddly asking if her clothes were size 14, he knocked her unconscious. He checked her coat and was pleased to see it was size 14. Then he tore off her blouse, threw it to the ground, and drove away with satisfaction. The next day, Clarice was pulled from training to accompany her superior. Crawford was investigating the recently discovered body of a woman in Virginia. On the way there, he showed Clarice another victim of Buffalo Bill found a few weeks earlier, with the skin stripped from her back. The killer had kept her captive for 3 days, did not rape her, then shot her, skinned her, and discarded the body. They met the local sheriff at the morgue of a funeral home, where a service was taking place in the next room. Seeing the ceremony, Clarice briefly recalled her father's funeral. After asking the local police to leave, the FBI unzipped the body bag and began the examination. Clarice quickly concluded that the victim had been brought from elsewhere, since her jewelry and makeup did not match the local style. Dirt under her broken nails showed that she had crawled in an attempt to escape. Finally, Clarice discovered a cocoon stuffed into the victim's throat. The body was also skinned in 2 large diamond-shaped patches on the buttocks. Clarice took the cocoon to her friends, who were entomologists, for examination. They revealed it was a death's head moth, a species found only in Asia. From its condition, they concluded that someone had been raising it locally. At the same time, the scene shifted to Buffalo Bill's house, where he kept several insect tanks and sewed while completely naked. A woman's cries for help echoed from a well in the next room. The following day, Clarice heard a news report about the kidnapping of that same woman. The victim was Catherine Martin, the daughter of a United States senator. They watched the senator deliver a heartfelt message to Buffalo Bill, pleading for her daughter's release. With this kidnapping, the U.S. government made rescuing Catherine its top priority and sent Clarice to speak with Hannibal Lecter again. This time, she carried several tempting offers if he would help capture Buffalo Bill. The offer included moving Hannibal to a nursing facility with a beautiful view and granting him a supervised 1-week annual vacation to Plum Island. He accepted, but only on the condition that Clarice share more personal stories with him. She agreed and began recounting how her father was murdered by 2 armed robbers when she was a child. Clarice later lived on a farm with her mother and stepfather until one day she ran away, though not because of mistreatment. In return, Hannibal asked if Catherine was a large woman, and Clarice confirmed it. She told him about the moth found in the earlier victim's body and the cocoon discovered in Raspail's head. Hannibal explained that a moth represents transformation, and Buffalo Bill's act of skinning his victims showed that he was preparing for a transformation of his own. Hannibal believed that Buffalo Bill had been abused as a child, which made him hate his own identity and wrongly see himself as transgender, though he was not. He also suggested that Bill had tried to apply for gender reassignment surgery at 3 major clinics, but was rejected because of his disturbed mindset. Unbeknownst to them, Dr. Chilton, jealous that the federal government had chosen Clarice instead of him, secretly listened to their conversation. In the next scene, Buffalo Bill forced Catherine to rub lotion all over her body and threatened to spray her with water if she refused. Catherine cried and begged to be released, but Bill ignored her. He lowered a lit basket to retrieve the lotion, allowing her to see bloody claw marks on the wall. Terrified, she screamed louder while he mocked her. After Clarice left, Chilton tightened his control over Hannibal and taunted him, revealing that Clarice's offer had been a lie. Hannibal was transferred to another prison in Tennessee. During their conversation, he quietly noticed Chilton's pen. A police escort accompanied him on the flight to Tennessee. When they landed, Chilton realized his pen was missing but paid little attention. Hannibal was then brought to meet the senator, who now presented a genuine offer in exchange for her daughter's safe return. Hannibal revealed Buffalo Bill's age, physical traits, and where he might be found. He explained that he knew this because Raspail, Buffalo Bill's boyfriend, had once been his patient before Bill killed him. Clarice then rushed to the Tennessee courthouse to meet Hannibal. Even knowing she had lied, he continued speaking with her, hinting that people kill out of envy, and what they envy is often what they see every day. However, Hannibal refused to reveal more until Clarice explained why she had run away from the farm as a child. Clarice revealed that one early morning, she heard screams and went to the barn, where she saw lambs crying as they were slaughtered. She tried to free them, but they would not run. So Clarice took a lamb and ran away, hoping to save at least one life. But she was soon caught and sent back to the orphanage. Her story symbolized her deep desire to protect the innocent. Lecter was moved and thanked her for sharing the memory. However, before he could offer any help, Chilton arrived and forced Clarice to leave, determined to claim all the credit for handling Hannibal himself. For reasons unknown, Hannibal decided to return the case file to Clarice, and she eagerly accepted it. That evening, during his dinner time, he asked for an extra serving of rare lamb chops, which irritated the guards. To ensure safety, they chained him to the bars of his cell. No one realized Hannibal had kept the pen's tip hidden in his mouth and used it to unlock his restraints. When a guard bent down to collect the tray, Hannibal suddenly handcuffed him to the bars, bit his mouth, and then brutally beat him to death. Moments later, the officers downstairs noticed the elevator moving up to the 5th floor, even though no one was allowed there, followed by a burst of gunfire. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor, drawing several officers to rush up. They found Hannibal's cell wide open and the mutilated body of a guard gruesomely displayed with his entrails exposed. Another officer's face was torn apart, yet he was still barely breathing. ASWAT team and an ambulance were immediately called to rush him to the hospital. But as the elevator descended, blood began dripping from the ceiling. When the elevator stopped, the sheriff informed his team that Hannibal, wounded, was hiding on top of the cabin, while the injured officer was rushed to the hospital. 2 policemen climbed up and peered into the shaft to check. Since they needed Hannibal alive to catch Buffalo Bill, one officer shot him in the leg to disable him, but he remained motionless. The tactical team on the lower floor opened the elevator and were horrified to find a dead officer with his face removed. They had no idea that Hannibal was actually inside the ambulance, disguised with the officer's face. Soon after, Clarice was informed that the ambulance had been found abandoned on the roadside with a dead paramedic inside, and that Hannibal had also killed a tourist. Clarice was now more determined than ever to solve the Buffalo Bill case. She studied the file Hannibal had given her, where he had noted that the victims followed a certain pattern. This reminded her of their discussion about jealousy, leading her to realize that the first victim might have been someone he knew, Frederica Bimmel, from Ohio. Clarice drove to the home of Frederica, the first victim, to continue her investigation. Inside, she noticed sewing tools and realized Frederica was a seamstress. She then discovered dresses with patterns identical to the patches of skin buffalo Bill had taken from his victims' backs. Clarice finally formed a theory and called Crawford. She believed Buffalo Bill was making a suit of human skin to become a woman. However, Crawford explained that, with Hannibal's help, they had narrowed it down to 3 major gender reassignment clinics and were already on their way to Chicago to arrest the suspect. Meanwhile, Catherine, the senator's daughter, tied a bone to the rope Buffalo Bill used to lower lotion to her and tossed it up to the top of the pit. She tried to lure his dog down. At the same time, Buffalo Bill was dressing up and putting on makeup, blasting music and posing as if he were in front of a camera. Ignoring Crawford's words, Clarice continued her investigation. She met Frederica's friend and learned that the victim once worked as a seamstress for a woman named Mrs. Lipman. Meanwhile, inside Buffalo Bill's hideout, Catherine managed to capture his dog. Bill panicked when he saw her holding it, and she threatened to harm the animal if he didn't give her the phone. At the same time, armed FBI agents arrived at a house, ready to ambush the killer. Meanwhile, Buffalo Bill heard the doorbell and went to answer it. But instead of facing the FBI, he found Clarice, unaware of the danger, visiting the house because it once belonged to Mrs. Lipman. Meanwhile, in another city, Crawford led a raid on an empty house and realized Clarice was investigating alone. Back with Clarice, Buffalo Bill led her inside and introduced himself as Jack Gordon. He calmly claimed to have the phone number of Mrs. Littman's son for her to contact. As she moved deeper inside, Clarice saw a death's head moth and realized she had found the killer. She drew her gun at once, but he escaped before she could fire. Clarice chased him into the basement, where she discovered a dark hallway leading to his lair. Clarice heard Catherine's cries for help and found her in the well, but the killer was gone. She calmed Catherine and went on searching. When she stepped into the bathroom, the light suddenly went out. In the darkness, Clarice groped her way forward, unaware that the killer, wearing night vision goggles, was silently following her. He reached out with delight, almost touching Clarice. As he raised his gun, the sound of cocking it gave away his position. Clarice fired immediately, the bullet piercing the wall and revealing Buffalo Bill dead on the floor. The next scene showed the senator's daughter walking out safely with the little dog in her arms, while Clarice proudly walked beside Crawford. A few days later, at the FBI Academy graduation, Clarice received her official badge along with honorary praise. She thanked Crawford for his guidance and the opportunity he had given her. At the celebration afterward, she was surprised by a call from Hannibal Lecter. He greeted her, assuring her that he had no intention of killing her, believing the world was better with her in it. Before the film ended, he mentioned he was going to have an old friend for dinner, hinting at Dr. Chilton's presence. He then hung up and walked away, leaving Clarice in shock.